Good morning. Oh, I shall be brief. Oh, but I love this book, The House in Carter Lane. It is undoubtedly one of my favourites. You can read more about it, about the synopsis of it, down below. But here is a brief account of it. The story follows the multi-generational history of Clifton Buildings in London, a stone's throw away from St Paul's Cathedral, beginning with its construction by the ruthless Robert Clarkson in 1701. The story spans 3 centuries, focusing on the Radcliffe and Bright families who operate a funeral parlour within the house's walls during the Victorian era and the Blitz. Central to the story is a recurring theme of supernatural occurrences and the discovery of Rahel Ugusflügel diaries. You can tell I don't speak German. Which hint at a temporal effect which caused miracles to happen on Christmas Day. Moving into the modern era, the building is converted into flats, where elderly residents like Candy Wilson, an American, attempt to solve the historical puzzles of their home. The chronicle concludes in the distant future as a massive machine known as the Destroyer finally levels the structure, erasing the last physical remnants of its long and haunted legacy. That only takes up the last little bit of the book. I love this book. I don't know why I love this book. It's got great reviews on Amazon, as it should do. And the AI loves it as well. Here we go. Well, here's a little bit of extra video. It's I've just listened to the AI voices and I felt rather sad, actually. I wrote this or published it around about March of 2015, and long before AI came about. And I probably used Google to find out information, but most of the information was garnered from tramping up and down London, going into museums and searching in books and libraries. The amount of research that I did for this book was astonishing. It's very research heavy. Going into St Paul's Cathedral and searching libraries over 3 centuries, and listening to the AI, I felt rather sad because well, that was 10 years ago. My brain is softened a little bit, sadly. I don't think I'm capable of writing that sort of thing anymore. It's a profound novel. Yeah, it's sad. My days of writing that sort of novel has gone, sadly. I don't know why I just feel the need to say that it is one of my favourite novels. It's complex and it's profound. There you go. I just wanted to add that. Anyway, on with it. There you go.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. You brought us an extraordinary stack of sources today, a collection of journals, architectural notes, and narrative histories that trace the life cycle of one single, rather unassuming structure in London. Clifton Buildings on Carter Lane.
It really is an incredible collection.
It's not just history, is it? It feels more like a study in localized destiny.
Exactly.
Yeah.
This isn't a general survey of London's development. It's a hyper-focused biography of one address.
Right.
And the succession of families who lived, died, and worked within its walls. We're tracking this structure across 350 years, from its chaotic post-Great Fire construction in the 18th century, right up to its ultimate demolition in the mid-21st century.
So our mission today is to understand the evolution of this tiny cornerstone of the city, following the fortunes and the deeply complex fates of everyone from the initial spiteful builder through generations of undertakers to the American heiress who converted it into modern flats and finally the engineer who took it down.
But there's a twist.
There is. And what elevates this from a simple historical report into a true deep dive is the bizarre, persistent, and frankly rather spooky thread woven through the entire narrative.
A remarkable series of temporal coincidences.
And these seemingly miraculous clusters of good fortune that always seem to converge on Christmas Day in this specific location.
It forces us to ask, was this place cursed by its grim beginning, only to be, blessed by some sort of intervention? We have to track the source material to figure out if one singular, overwhelming act of goodness somehow managed to bend time and fate for the inhabitants of Clifton Buildings.
Across 3 centuries.
Exactly.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting right at the very beginning when the plot was first clear in 1701.
Let's do it.
The man responsible for laying the foundation of Clifton Buildings was Mr. Robert Clarkson, the head of Clarkson Sons. This firm was essentially founded on capitalization. They made their fortunes exploiting the massive demand for rebuilding after the Great Fire.
After 1666, yeah. But the sources don't paint a picture of a pioneering civic hero.
Far from it.
Far from it. Clarkson is described by his own employees and, amazingly, his own children as a devil of a man.
Wow.
He was the pure, ruthless face of 18th century commercial ambition. The sources emphasize that his only philosophy in life was the accumulation of wealth.
And he pursued it with an unprincipled vigor that made him, universally disliked.
Universally disliked, but undeniably successful.
He ran a serious operation, too. This wasn't a small-time contractor. He had a permanent workforce of 55 men.
That's right. 20 of those were highly skilled tradesmen, the master masons, the expert carpenters, the glass workers. But then there was the secondary workforce.
And that's where the ruthlessness really comes through.
It does. To keep costs low, he hired an additional 20 boys, all under the age of 12.
Under 12.
Hired daily as cheap, expendable labor for the most grueling, dangerous, and unskilled tasks. It speaks volumes, about the value of human life in that era.
And his motivations were often rooted in sheer spite, which is almost comical in a dark way. We see him engaging in another land deal at Westmouth Field just before Carter Lane.
Right. He paid an exorbitant price, well over the market rate, for a 400-year-old public house. But why?
That's the question.
He did it simply to spite the deceased former owner, someone whom Clarkson's own father had disliked years before.
That's incredible. So it's a completely irrational, emotional transaction driven by generations-old grudges.
Absolutely. And he didn't just buy it. He demonstrated his power by having that building, which the locals apparently called beloved, leveled in a single week.
That's a key insight into his personality. He was destructive purely to prove a point and seize a market advantage.
That Westmouth Field structure was near the ancient livestock market, and Clarkson's sole intention was to build a bigger, better public house there to crush any competition.
Always about profit and leverage.
Never about preserving any sense of history or community.
Which brings us to the Carter Lane site, where Clifton Buildings was to rise. This location was prime, just south of Sir Christopher Wren's massive, newly completed St. Paul's Cathedral.
And the sources specifically note Clarkson's deep-seated, hidden jealousy of Wren. They even quote Shakespeare. The lady doth protest too much, methinks.
So it suggests his architectural ambitions at Carter Lane were fueled by a desire to upstage a legend, not by pure artistic vision.
That seems to be the case.
So he was building something expensive, ambitious, and spiteful. What did Clifton Buildings actually look like?
Well, it was a significant departure from the norm for that area, which was quickly becoming dense and utilitarian. Clarkson planned it to be residences for the gentry.
Oh.
It was brick clad in stone, quite modern for the time, featuring 4 levels built around a large courtyard, specifically designed for stabling horses, signaling the wealthy clientele he was targeting.
And the interior was complex, right?
Yeah.
Renaissance design, but almost overly fussy.
Exactly. It was intended to be opulent. Many complex chambers, elaborate staircases, and exquisite decorative plasterwork everywhere.
So detailed ceiling roses, that sort of thing.
All of it. Corbels, delicate archways. But the moment he started cutting corners, the ambition started sacrificing the quality. He immediately scrapped the architect's planned central rotunda, a key feature to maximize saleable living space.
Of course he did.
And he simplified the ground floor from a high-end, double bow-fronted shop design to something much cheaper and quicker. He was rushing the job, determined to sell by autumn.
But the rush exposed him to the deep historical fear associated with the land. He might have been modern and greedy, but his workforce was steeped in tradition and superstition.
Oh, they were. He had hired mostly older, more conservative craftsmen who were already wary of such a large, modern, quickly built project. And the site itself was ancient, resting on centuries of forgotten history.
It had a reputation.
A known reputation for tragedy. Laborers began reporting sightings. The ghost of a young girl and an old man with a horribly disfigured face, which led to an unease that really slowed production.
And then the superstition turned into horrific reality.
Yes. In July, the work almost completely halted. A laborer named Mr. Cooper drowned after falling into a deep hole that had filled with stagnant water and construction debris.
Horrible.
Tragically, just 2 days later, a boy from Clarkson's cheap labor pool fell into the exact same hole and died.
The same hole. That's less superstition and more gross negligence, surely.
You'd think so. The sources say this was enough to spook his predominantly French and already cheaply hired laborers into almost abandoning the site entirely. He had a full-blown labor crisis on his hands.
And this is where Clarkson's character takes another strange turn. The sources don't just say he paid the boy's family off.
No, they claim he personally funded the boy's funeral and, in a strange nod to the anxieties of the time, performed his own version of sympathetic magic.
Sympathetic magic. What does that even mean? Given his profile, a ruthless, materialistic pragmatist, wasn't it much more likely a massive cash payout to quiet the workers, which the sources later romanticized as magic?
That's a highly critical and, I think, very sensible interpretation. The sources don't provide details on the magic, which supports your skepticism.
Right.
However, the fact that the work did resume quickly, despite 2 deaths in 2 days in the same spot, it suggests whatever Clarkson did was overwhelmingly effective. Whether it was psychological, financial, or indeed ritualistic, he quelled the panic.
And the outcome?
The house was sold almost immediately before the windows were even installed to a wealthy widow from Lancaster.
So the house is founded on spite, rushed construction, quelled tragedy, and the powerful, dark energy of Robert Clarkson.
And the irony is palpable. Clarkson had envisioned Clifton Buildings bringing a cleaner period to Carter Lane, attracting the gentry. That ambition was instantly crushed.
What happened?
The land surrounding Carter Lane quickly became intensely industrial. We're talking noxious, horrible trades like bone boiling, catgut making, fish smoking, and tanning.
Oh, awful.
And these vertiginous, overcrowded warehouses sprung up right next to the horse stabling area near Puddle Dock.
Puddle Dock. For listeners unfamiliar, that sounds like a horrible place to be.
It was a breeding ground for every disease imaginable. Puddle Dock sat directly on the Thames shore, a stretch notorious for sewage runoff and filth. The entire neighborhood became synonymous with filth and disease.
So, cholera, typhus.
All of it, influenza, the sources grimly state. The only things living amongst all this filth were men and rats.
Oh.
So the initial darkness of the site was just reinforced by the oppressive industrial squalor that surrounded it. It set a heavy tone for the next century of residents.
Fast forwarding now, approximately 140 years, to Christmas 1842. The building's function has entirely shifted, but that atmosphere of grimness, it remains intense. We are immersed in the deepest heart of Victorian London. The oily fog is drifting off the Thames, barely lit Blackfriars Bridge is visible, and the silent, shadowy night soil men are working the shore.
A perfect setting. And the resident now is Percy Radcliffe, 27 years old, running Radcliffe's funeral parlor out of the ground floor of Clifton Buildings.
It's the perfect dark contrast to Clarkson's original vision. The house, built on death and spite, has become a place of professional death.
It has. And Percy is an incredibly complex figure. He survived a genuinely horrific childhood, the only one of 7 children to live past infancy, a common but devastating reality of that era.
And his entry into the death trade was anything but legitimate.
No, his father was a resurrectionist.
A body snatcher.
A body snatcher. Percy started working for him at the tender age of 7, primarily as a lookout, learning to navigate the city's darkness and corruption. His transition into a legitimate undertaker was a conscious effort, motivated purely by meeting his future wife, Rahel Adler-Slugel.
So he wanted respectability for her sake.
Exactly. Though the sources are clear, he remained corruptible.
Tell us more about Rahl. She's key to the building's later mystery.
Rahel was born in Germany in 1813. Like Percy, she suffered an early tragedy. Her mother died in childbirth. She grew up initially wealthy. Her father owned thriving jewelry shops in Cologne and Berlin.
But their fortune collapsed.
It did, when she was 12, due to a major theft, forcing the family into poverty and eventually emigration to the slums of London. This background forged a tough, resilient personality.
A resilient person, yes, but not immune to the building's lingering dark reputation.
Absolutely not. Despite her worldly experience, she retained superstitious beliefs. She refused to use the outside privy after dark.
Why?
Specifically because she feared encountering the ghost of the angry builder, a direct callback to Clarkson and the site's violent foundation.
Their business model reflected their conflicting ambitions. They were low class, catering to the poor, but they were trying to aim for the more lucrative end of the market.
They were. They used superior, unusual funeral cards for their social standing, featuring classical renderings like Greek urns and weeping figures, trying to imply a standard of service far beyond what most of their clients expected.
But Percy still operated in the shadows.
Still his old habits, taking the railings, which was the deceased's false teeth, and selling their clothes. Small, corruptible acts necessary to survive.
By December 1842, they were in deep financial distress. Percy was frequenting the local taverns, the Rising Sun, Saracen's Head, not for pleasure, but to desperately drum up business.
He'd calculated he needed exactly 312 funerals a year just to break even. He was taking pre-orders based on shaky promissory notes. It was dire.
And that desperation, coupled with the building's physical grimness, is personified by the figure living on the first floor, the unseen, immoral landlord, known only by the nickname he earned.
Mr. Scrooge?
The landlord has a nefarious reputation, and Rahel saw him as the devil. The anecdote that cements this is truly chilling.
It paints the picture of ultimate coldness. The incident occurred when Rahel slipped on the icy courtyard returning from Farnham's, a local supplier, and fell hard on her shoulder. The sources describe Scrooge seeing her spread-eagled in the yard in the snow, but continuing straight past her door without offering any aid or even a word.
Just walks on by.
Total indifference. His coldness mirrored the building's oppressive, desperate atmosphere.
And this sets the stage for the first and most significant temporal coincidence, the Scrooge effect. It's Christmas Eve, and Percy is out trying to demand payment from a Mrs. Finnegan, a notoriously difficult widow.
But his Dutch courage fails him. He returns home empty-handed, utterly defeated. That night, outside his own door, the sources claim the miserable Mr. Scrooge himself fell in the deep snow, shouting and thrashing about in his frustration.
The atmosphere in Clifton Buildings reached a critical point of cold despair.
It did.
But then, Christmas Day, 1842, the change. It's instantaneous and overwhelming.
The sources describe Scrooge being seen the next morning, Christmas Day, dancing in the snow in his nightdress and cap. Dancing. He was ordering a turkey for a boy, and more significantly for the Radcliffes, sending a massive hamper of food, wine, and cheer to their family.
Rahel was so shocked, she wondered if someone had died and left him a fortune.
But she dismissed that immediately, knowing he was too universally hated to have an admirer. His changing character was a seismic event, noticed by everyone.
And simultaneously, Percy wakes up on Christmas morning having dreamt he saw 2 ghosts.
Crucially, he interprets these not as omens of death or past regrets, but as the spirits of his future children. It signifies immediate, family-based good fortune. Financial and emotional circumstances were instantly reversed by this massive, mysterious infusion of external goodness.
This is the nexus of the deep dive.
Yeah.
The source establishes a possible real-life, powerful Scrooge figure whose sudden, overwhelming change in character coincided perfectly with specific, positive temporal events for the building's struggling residents.
And here's the paradox we must confront. Dickens's A Christmas Carol wasn't published until late 1843, almost a year later.
Right. So if we accept the sources as narrative truth, we can't dismiss this as simply a literary echo.
Precisely. The question then becomes, did the emotional magnitude of this event, a shift from pure malice to overwhelming joyful benevolence, somehow create a local field of temporal energy? The sources clearly imply that this was the turning point, a powerful moment that set up a pattern that would repeat in the house for centuries.
It's the ultimate localized destiny study. A real-life act of goodness, whatever caused it, became a protective shield for everyone living at Clifton Buildings.
Moving forward, the Radcliffes' initial ambition was indeed realized. The funeral business stabilized, and they successfully maintained it for 40 years. But the family's peace was shattered in 1868.
When their son, Oscar, died tragically at the age of 23.
Yes, and that dashed their plans to pass on the business. This left their daughter, Gemma, only 16 at the time, in a terrible bind, pressured into a desperate marriage of convenience.
She married Arthur Bright, a man raised in the tobacco trade who was brought in specifically to run the business.
And the sources are brutally honest that their marriage was not based on love. Arthur was deeply unhappy, morose, and drank heavily gin, specifically at the Dick Whittington Inn. He was depressed since his mother's death in 1872.
Then Rahel, the resilient German wife, died. We were told she passed in 1881 or 1882 of sudden but natural causes.
But Gemma's experience immediately after her death suggested a secret, a huge, unresolved mystery.
What happened?
Gemma was mysteriously refused permission to view her mother's body. This, combined with the fact that Rahel, a constant and enthusiastic writer, had stopped writing in her diary exactly 1 month before her death, it immediately fueled Gemma's deep-seated suspicion that something was being concealed.
And Gemma's protective actions over the diaries form a core, fascinating secret of Clifton Buildings. What did she do with them?
She decided that Rasel's secret, whatever it was, perhaps detailing the family's shady past, or maybe even Rahel's own beliefs about the house's strange destiny, must be protected.
Protected from Arthur and from the conservative Victorian society she lived in.
Right. She first hid the 7 thick books, wrapped them carefully in oilskin, and sealed them meticulously with white wax.
But she moved them later.
She did. She moved them to a permanent, self-constructed opening in the wall of her own bedroom. Her reasoning was that she hoped a future population might be more enlightened and would appreciate the true contents.
So she literally entombed her mother's secret history inside the structure of the house itself. Meanwhile, by 1892, Arthur Bright was achieving financial success.
Yes, due to massive city infrastructure projects, the building of Queen Victoria Street and the Holborn Viaduct had made his travel and business logistics far easier.
But success didn't sweeten him.
Not at all. He remained utterly uncompassionate. The sources detail a specific, horrifying fight Gemma had with him over his intent to charge a poor widow extra for a coat she did not want for her infant's funeral.
That's just awful.
That stark lack of empathy characterized his control over the house.
And Gemma's private life was miserable, characterized by separate bedrooms due to Arthur's constant stench, a mix of stale gin, smoke, and sweat.
She found comfort in the past, missing Rahel intensely and visiting her deceased brother Oscar's grave at St. Mildred in Bread Street, pouring out all her concerns there.
The domestic crisis peaked in 1892.
It did. She discovered her son Alfred was the father of an illegitimate child with a girl named Carol. This led to Alfred's immediate expulsion from his hairdresser apprenticeship, plunging the family into shame.
And Gemma sought comfort in prayer, desperately hoping that the strange temporal luck associated with the house might strike again.
And it does, almost exactly 49 years after the initial Scrooge effect. This is the Christmas coincidence number 2.
And the luck manifests simultaneously in 2 forms. First, the material luck.
Arthur, the miserable successor, discovered a gold half-guinea coin inside an egg laid by one of the chickens they kept in the courtyard coop.
Inside an egg? How is that possible?
The impossibility of it forced even the pragmatic Arthur to rationalize. He concluded the chicken must have swallowed it long ago. But regardless of the mechanism, it represented unexpected, tangible financial gain right when they were facing ruin.
And at the same time, Alfred received crushing personal news that Christmas morning.
The girl he was completely besotted with, Victoria, rejected him for another man named Charles. This seemed like a devastating setback, a heartbreaking end to his romantic aspirations.
But here's where the temporal protection truly reveals its scope. Looking forward in time.
Yes. Years later, Gemma was reading the papers and learned a shocking detail. Victoria and Charles Webb were convicted of attempted murder.
Wait, so Alfred's devastating rejection, received on that specific Christmas day, was revealed years later to be a hidden, life-saving act of fate.
Absolutely. It protected him from marrying a future criminal. The rejection was the blessing. The coin and the escape from a disastrous criminal fate happened simultaneously, reinforcing this notion that the place was actively protected by a strange temporal destiny.
It wasn't just about financial gain or dreams. It was about avoiding existential catastrophe.
Exactly.
So after 140 years, the house seems to have shifted from being built on spite to being sustained by tragedy, waiting for this strange cycle of protection to repeat every half-century. That's a fascinating narrative.
The cycle continues, plunging the building into its next major historical event. The shadow of the Blitz in 1940, Alfred Bright, Gemma's son, is now 54 and running the parlor.
And business horrifically has exploded because the city is under constant aerial assault.
London had 17 operational funeral homes in the city during the Blitz, and the demand was overwhelming. The sources describe Alfred's daily reality, and it was gruesome.
Unimaginable scenes.
Graveyards scattered with long dead bodies after bomb strikes exposed ancient tombs, the permanent taste of plaster dust in the air, the metallic tang of death. Alfred was a man constantly operating at the epicenter of death and destruction.
And family life was incredibly fraught during this time. Gemma, now 88, had descended into senile dementia.
Yes, and the sources capture a heartbreaking detail about her condition. While she often failed to recognize Alfred, she developed a strange compulsion to use shocking foul language.
Asking her own son, "Who the F are you?"
Yes. The strain on Alfred and his wife Nellie must have been immense. Alfred relied on a flashy black marketeer named Bert, who was essential for survival, supplying him with subsidized coffins and other necessities.
And the peril extended to their sons as well. Sam, the youngest, a wild and undomesticated heathen, now 15.
He'd joined a dangerous South London gang engaging in larceny, and his involvement nearly cost him his life. He was beaten and slashed with a knife over a stolen watch taken from a bombed jeweler's shop.
A close brush with total ruin.
Yeah.
And Robert, the elder son, was crippled by infantile paralysis or polio.
He used calipers and a crutch, and his emotional life was marked by crushing sadness due to his physical limitations. He was desperately in love with Eleanor, the verger's daughter.
And his heartbreak reached its peak.
When she announced she was leaving London, pursuing opportunities she felt were impossible in the war-torn city, and expressed reluctance to be seen walking publicly with a cripple.
Devastating for him.
Utterly. He felt abandoned and defined by his ailment.
But once again, the 400 and 849-year temporal cycle delivers. The Christmas coincidence number 3 hits in 1940 with a flurry of life-affirming events amidst the national chaos.
First, the survival event. Nellie, Alfred's wife, was caught in a massive raid near Aldgate while ordering textiles. She was physically thrown sideways by the blast and passed out.
But she was taken in by a kind couple.
Yes, and returned home, safe and unharmed, on Christmas Day. A direct, miraculous reprieve from a death that would have shattered the family.
Then the spiritual resolution.
Gemma, waking up screaming, claimed her mother's spirit, Rahel, had appeared to her dressed in gold, finally forgiving her for hiding the diaries decades earlier.
And this is a profound moment, whether it was a genuine spiritual encounter or a psychological breakthrough.
The sources note that this event crucially ended her manic, foul-mouthed state. It brought her a measure of genuine peace before her death in 1943. The guilt was lifted.
And for Robert, the heartbroken son, hope was restored.
Eleanor sent him a card and a letter before departing, asking him specifically to wait for her, giving him unexpected hope for their future.
And finally, the unexpected financial blessing.
Alfred's daughter, Hermione, found a £5 note in the gutter. Although an unpleasant neighbor, a Mr. Lehman, falsely claimed it initially.
He returned it.
He returned the following morning, Christmas Day, 1940, and honestly delivered the substantial sum of money to the Bright family.
This specific cluster is overwhelming evidence for the theory. Survival from near death, spiritual peace, renewed hope, and a financial reward, all converging on that specific, devastating Christmas Day.
If the building was not actively protected, the convergence of positive outcomes defies staggering odds, especially in the context of the Blitz.
But the temporal protection didn't seem to hold forever for the individuals. After the war, the family faced tragedy again.
It did. Alfred died of lung cancer in 1959. Sam, the son who had narrowly escaped the police, was shot and killed during an armed raid on a Woolworths in 1957. And Robert, unable to fully cope with his polio, and entered a care home and eventually died.
The Bright family fragmented, and the house itself deteriorated as the family crumbled around it.
Until the scullery roof collapsed in 1963. Nellie desperately sought funding for repairs from the local council, but was refused outright.
Why?
The cruel logic of post-war bureaucracy. Only properties that qualified for bomb relief received funding, and Clifton Buildings hadn't sustained bomb damage.
So she was forced to sell, but she had a moment of inspiration.
She did. She saw the ruins of a fine Baroque house nearby where a bomb had consumed the entire interior but left the glorious frontage completely intact. So she insisted that the buyer must preserve the historical frontage of Clifton Buildings.
And the buyer was a true product of the post-war global economy, Candy Wilson.
An American heiress in her early 20s whose family had made a fortune in Hollywood lighting. She was energetic, slightly abrasive, and talked openly about her greenbacks.
She embraced modernization with gusto.
Converting the single building into 8 separate flats, insisting on preserving the facade.
And the ultimate change, destroying the original courtyard that had witnessed 2 centuries of London life and death.
Yes. She tore it up, where Scrooge had shouted in the snow and the chickens had laid their golden eggs, to install underground parking. She boasted, perfectly encapsulating the new era. A car parking space under the house, anything's possible if you got the greenbacks.
The history was literally paved over, but the structural core, holding Rahel's secrets, remained. Now we fast forwarded to 2009. Nearly another full cycle later, Candy Wilson is now 68.
And temporarily confined to a wheelchair after a fall, but her obsession with the house's history has become profound. She's been studying Rahel's diaries, the 7 thick books Nellie discovered in the wall in 1943, for years.
Along with her neighbor, the daughter who found the 5 pounds, Hermione Bright, now 79 and living in Flat A.
And Candy noticed the persistent, undeniable pattern. Significant positive events consistently clustered around Christmas Day. She felt she needed a scientific or pseudoscientific framework to explain this.
She needed an analogy to bridge the gap between supernatural luck and repeatable phenomena.
She found it in the concept of the Maharishi effect.
Let's clearly define that for the listener, because the link to temporal destiny is complex.
The Maharishi effect is a controversial theory suggesting that when a critical mass of people, say 1% of a community, practices transcendental meditation, it creates a calming effect that manifests in, for example, a drop in crime rates.
Okay, so concentrated positive mental energy can influence a geographic area.
That's the idea. So Candy took that premise, that concentrated positivity creates a localized effect, and applied it to time instead of space.
And this is the heart of her temporal expansion theory.
Exactly. Her proposal is that Scrooge's overwhelming, good-hearted revelation in 1842 was so potent, so transformative, that it created a critical mass of one person.
And this explosion of goodness was powerful enough to expand not just geographically, but temporally.
Affecting the destiny and fate of the residents, specifically aligning the blessings every 48 or 49 years.
That is a colossal claim. Given the sheer random chaos of life, war, poverty, disease, to claim a single historical moment dictated a periodic safety net for 160 years, we have to look closely at her evidence.
And this is where the source material presents a compelling, structured argument. The foundational event is 1442-43, Scrooge's transformation, Percy's dream.
49 years later, 1892, the gold coin, Alfred's life-saving rejection.
And 48 years after that, the Blitz cluster in 1940. Nellie's survival, Gemma's vision, Robert's letter, Hermione's money.
The consistency is remarkable. But doesn't this raise a fundamental paradox? We are analyzing a theory predicated on a figure named Scrooge, whose name is synonymous with a fictional character.
Yeah.
How do we square that circle?
That's the critical challenge. The sources themselves embrace this paradox. They imply that the Scrooge event, while perhaps inspiring a fictional work later, was a real, powerful turning point that influenced the destiny of the building.
So within the framework of this localized history, we have to accept that the emotional energy was a legitimate, measurable force.
That's what Candy and Hermione concluded after years of validating the timing. The question isn't whether it was random, but what caused the periodicity. And the theory predicted that the next cluster of events would fall around 2009.
That's the test. So 2009 arrives. Clifton Buildings is 8 modern flats, its history barely visible. The residents are mostly unaware of the house's protective cycle.
This is the moment of truth for the temporal expansion theory, and the sources confirm an astonishing result. The Christmas coincidence number 4 delivers a triple cluster of life-altering positive news, all tied precisely to Christmas Day.
Let's start with Judge Darrell King in Flat E. His situation was agonizing, pure existential fear.
He was worried sick about extreme fatigue, convinced he was dying of cancer, as his mother had. He was living under a dark cloud, anticipating a grim diagnosis in the new year.
But instead, the results arrived on Christmas Day.
Delivered to him by Candy's carer, Judith, the news was overwhelmingly good. Not cancer, but merely iron and calcium deficiency. The terror of weeks instantly evaporated, replaced by an immense, life-affirming realization of survival.
A true Christmas gift. Next, we turn to Hartley Reid in Flat D, a man whose life had been marked by almost continuous hardship.
Hartley had deep roots nearby. His life was a catalog of tragedies. His father's death, his wife jailed for accidental murder, chronic back problems, and deep depression. He was at a breaking point.
And what did he find on Christmas Day?
He was rummaging through his late mother's wardrobe and discovered a hidden, folded letter written in 1974. The letter revealed a complex but utterly life-changing personal truth. His real father was not the man he knew, but a Metropolitan Police sergeant named Howard Shaw.
That's a revelation that completely fractures a man's identity. But within the context of the temporal theory, it's a positive force, a new truth.
Exactly. It wasn't simple good fortune. It was a complex resolution to decades of hidden history, delivered precisely on the protective day.
And finally, Hermione Bright, the daughter of Alfred who saw the original Good Luck in 1940, experienced the temporal effect herself.
On Christmas Day, a middle-aged, well-dressed man showed up. Hermione initially claimed to be ill and turned him away, but later confessed to Candy that the man was Harry Wallace.
Her son.
Her son, whom she had given up for adoption 30 years prior. A reunion, a resolution to decades of maternal grief and secrecy, delivered right on schedule.
The pattern holds up perfectly. Judge King received clarity on his health, Hartley Reid on his identity, and Hermione on her family.
3 profound, positive, life-altering events, all delivered or revealed on Christmas Day 2009, precisely according to the 849-year cycle established by Scrooge 167 years earlier.
It's almost impossible to argue this is mere chance. The theory, however speculative, appears to be structurally sound within the historical data provided.
It suggests that fate, or destiny, was locally optimized for this address. However, even optimized fate has its limits. We must fast forward one last time.
The building continued to stand until 2050, when London was undergoing Phase 3 of the Northside Thames project. The ancient area was finally removed from the list of protected structures.
The demolition was managed by an engineer named Alexei, high above the site in a remote control booth, piloting a sophisticated droid he named the Destroyer.
And as the building's 3.5-century history concluded, the ultimate, perfect temporal coincidence occurred, a final echo of the house's strange protective past.
As the Destroyer sifted the rubble, Alexei's monitor alerted him to a round golden object lying in a wire basket. The monitor identified it as a guinea coin.
It's the physical, historical gold coin Arthur Bright found in the chicken egg in 1892, recovered 158 years later from the wreckage.
The building, built on Clarkson's spite, sustained by the Radcliffe's death trade, and repeatedly blessed by temporal coincidence, returned its final physical piece of good fortune to the earth before disappearing completely.
That single location, Clifton Buildings, served as a micro-mirror for London's entire history.
It traced the city's journey from reconstruction after the fire, through the brutal Victorian poverty, through the dangers of the Blitz, and into the modern corporate demolition age.
It's an incredible narrative arc for one address, proving that location can indeed dictate destiny.
It is. The life cycle of Clifton Buildings is complete. It was constructed on greed, became a center for the grim business of death, endured war, was saved by modernization, and was ultimately demolished. The house was a profound vessel for London's turbulent history.
And the central mystery remains deeply provocative. The temporal expansion theory suggested that a singular, overwhelming act of goodness Scrooge's miraculous conversion in 1842 created a moral pivot point so powerful it set a pattern of fate that protected the residents of that specific place, vertically through time, right up until its ultimate destruction.
And the sources reveal that Rahel Adlersflugel's 7 thick, oilskin-wrapped diaries containing the detailed history of her life, her secrets, and perhaps the first written record of these oddities, were passed down through Nellie and then became the property of Hermione.
Who was living there until the end.
We
know the gold coin was recovered.
We do.
That leads to the final question for you, the listener. Hermione, who experienced the final surge of the house's protection, was the guardian of that profound written history. Knowing the power and potential truth contained within those pages, What was the ultimate fate of Rahel Udler's Flugel's hidden diaries? Was the recovered guinea coin the only secret recovered from the rubble? Or did the true written history of Clifton Buildings survive the demolition? That choice, to preserve or destroy the secrets of the house, must have been Hermione's final silent act. Something for you to ponder.